Joining us now, Democratic member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. And I know you're headed to Brussels to be dealing with the NATO issue. So I'll start there with Sweden and Finland applying officially. What is the U.S. message, or what should it be, to Turkey, which is using this moment to resolve some of their issues, and they have many? What is the message to Turkey about taking this time to slow down the process for Sweden and Finland? What should it be?
Well, Mika, I think our message to Turkey needs to be this is a moment for NATO unity. And this is a watershed moment in the modern history of NATO to have Sweden and Finland applying for full NATO membership. These are sophisticated, advanced economies that have the capabilities of an advanced military and would provide significant additional security to the three Baltic states that are the very northernmost members of the Eastern European line of NATO. Of course, Norway is also a member of NATO. They would provide key additional security to NATO, and I think we need to move swiftly. We should not allow Turkey to leverage this moment, and I think the conversations need to be forceful and clear with Erdogan, Turkey's leader.
Okay. And what do you make of the 1,000 or so soldiers that are right now that were taken out of Mariupol and are being held by the Russians? How to resolve that?
Well, President Zelensky has asked for time to negotiate. Hopefully, they will be able to swap Russian prisoners of war for those Ukrainian defenders of the steel plant in Mariupol who have surrendered. It looks from your coverage that Russia is instead determined to parade them in front of cameras and use them for propaganda benefits. So I'm very concerned about their security, their safety, their health, and their future. They fought bravely for Ukraine, but Russia does not fight fair. And so I think their future may be cloudy at this moment.
Senator, good morning. As we move around the world, the President of the United States, as you know, in just a few hours will take off for a long trip to Asia, stopping first in South Korea, then going on to Japan, with much of the focus, of course, around China. What do you expect to see him do there, and what do you hope to hear from him?
President Biden will be reassuring several of our key allies in the Indo-Pacific about the United States' ongoing support for them, for their security, for their open and democratic societies in the face of challenges. Kim Jong-un of North Korea continues to test weapons, ballistic missile systems. There's some reporting that he may actually consider a nuclear test during this trip as a way of just further rattling our cage and making it hard for us to focus on the war in Eastern Europe, Russia's unjustified, unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. I would expect that President Biden will also urge our critical allies in the region to cooperate more closely, and he will thank them for their support of the sanctions against Russia.
Senator Coons, you're off to Brussels this weekend for talks with other NATO members. My question to you is there a role for the United States Navy in keeping the port of Odessa open?
That's a critical question, as your reporting has just shown. Part of the package of aid that the Senate will take up and pass later today will provide food assistance, which is critically needed to dozens of countries because Ukraine is such a big exporter of food, of wheat and of corn and of sunflower oil. If the port of Odessa cannot open, both the Ukrainian economy will, for the long term, be crippled, and folks who are fed through the World Food Program, 400 million people in dozens of other countries, will suffer critical food shortages. So some of the conversations I hope to have this weekend, and I know many other leaders in Congress and the administration are having, is about how we might open the port of Odessa, at least for humanitarian reasons, for the export of grain.
Senator Coons, good morning. Jonathan Lemire. One nation that has not fully bought into the alliance to stand up to Russia is India. And India will be part of the Quad meeting that the president convenes over the weekend while he is in Asia. What directly should this president say to his counterpart in India as to get them to cut their ties to Moscow?
Well, as you know, India has long relied on Russian military equipment. They have a contested border with China. They have a long and challenging relationship with Pakistan, and they have legitimate security concerns in their region. So I think the conversation needs to both respect India's legitimate security concerns, but also offer them a path forward for better trade and immigration and economic integration into the Quad, into the United States. There's a number of issues that have been minor irritants in the U.S.-India relationship that we could and should resolve. We need an ambassador to India. We have a very capable ambassador in Japan who's made quite an impact in just a few months, that he's been there. And our representatives around the world are critical. The Senate just unanimously confirmed our new ambassador to Ukraine last night. The reopening of our embassy in Kyiv is a key step forward there. I think the Quad and making a trip in person for the senior-most in-person meeting of the Quad leaders that's, I believe, ever happened is an important next step by President Biden to bring together these four critical Indo-Pacific nations.
Senator Chris Coons, thank you very much for being on this morning. We look forward to hearing about your trip.